A food allergy diagnosis changes your life. Food allergies affect you, your family, your education, your career, your everything. That said, as with all adversity in life, you have choices in how you can handle it. Some people choose to raise their hands, stand up, and get involved as advocates. They look food allergy right in the face and say, I've got this. And they focus their energy on empowering others to feel the same. These food allergy warriors range in age and background, but have one thing in common. They turned their food allergy story into action. Now I'm going to shine the spotlight on them to inspire you to join the fight against food allergies. This is Take Action with Hillary Carter.
Hi, I'm Hillary Carter. I'm a food allergy mom and advocate and proud member of FAIR's Board of Governors. And today I'm so excited to chat with my friend Heather Gass. She has food allergies, she's a food allergy mom, and she's a tremendous advocate. She is working on legislative action in New Hampshire and nationally for food allergies. Welcome, Heather.
Great to be here, Hillary.
So we had the privilege of meeting earlier this year when FAIR sort of stormed DC right before COVID hit, and we got to have a fly-in day where we got to work on the FASTER Act. And I know that you've been really, really involved with that, and I can't wait to hear what you're doing. But first, I want to back up just a little bit and share with everyone your personal food allergy story, because I know it affects you as well as your son. So give us sort of the overview of your journey.
Sure. So I've had a food allergy since I was about 4 years old, and kind of growing up at a time when peanut allergy was just starting to gain attention. So I actually have a tree nut allergy. So it was not quite well understood at that point. And, along the way, I pretty much had mild reactions up until I was about 23 years old. I went into full-blown anaphylaxis. So that was kind of my turning point to really start taking my allergy seriously and to understand that, there's no such thing as a mild allergy. There's only mild reactions. So I'm much more aware of everything now. I always carry my 2 epinephrine auto injectors, and life's been great on that front for me. And then about 2.5 years ago, I had my son, and we were very well aware that he could potentially have food allergies just with my history. So we did early introduction with him, and he had reactions to milk, sesame, and peanut, all on either the first or second time that he ingested them. So I was really hoping that he wasn't going to have food allergy, but I feel like just having the experience myself, I was a little bit more prepared, although, it was definitely a learning curve to understand how to take care of, a toddler with multiple food allergies. So that's where we are now. The whole experience with him having food allergies is really what pushed me into advocacy. Once he started going to daycare and navigating sort of the rules and regulations around food allergy within the daycare, I started asking a lot of questions about, okay, how can I keep my son safe? One of the other things that was really kind of a thing that threw us through the loop was the sesame allergy. So we were, with my nut allergy, I'd always been very used to label reading because it's labeled as a top 8 allergen. But with sesame, that's not the case. So that's really what pushed me to get on board with FAIR and really start advocating for the FASTER Act. So that kind of brings us to where we are today.
That brings us to where we are today. And it's been a really exciting year for the FASTER Act. And I know that you have been really involved not only nationally, but also with some legislative changes in your home state. So give us just an overview of what you've been working on. And you know what? There might be folks watching this who may not be familiar with the FASTER Act. So if you want to give us an overview of that, that'd be terrific.
Sure. So the FASTER Act is a bill that actually just passed the U.S. House of Representatives, I think it was 2 weeks ago, which is a huge achievement for us. And the FASTER Act is meant to label sesame as the 9th top allergen, meaning that on all packaged food products, you would be able to see it written in plain language. It would also allocate some resources to finding better statistics about food allergy and kind of leading a pathway for us to really better understand what food allergy is and potentially why it's happening. And in the end, really, we're looking for a cure. So it's one bill of good importance. That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it's multifaceted. Yeah. No, it's true. It is. It's important. It's multifaceted. And I think, just in case somebody isn't super familiar with, especially why sesame is so tricky, is I think, it is often labeled as spices or something really, really generic. It's not even called out specifically. My youngest son also has a sesame allergy. It's very, very tricky, and it's in a lot of things. And so this is super important. And as you said, we've made a lot of progress. It was passed in the House, which is a huge victory. Still work to do, but that's so exciting. And you had a huge hand in that. I think there's so many different kinds of advocacy, but what's cool about what you're doing is that it's tangible and you can actually see results, which is super cool. So tell us about kind of how you reach out to your local legislators, your experience with the fly-in DC, just so people at home want to understand how they might be able to do something similar, how they know to get involved.
Sure. So I would say, I had very little experience with advocacy before I started getting involved with FAIR and getting involved with the FASTER Act. And it's been a learning process along the way. But I think what's really helped me is just having that passion for finding a cure for food allergy and for being able to make my son's life better, and along with all the other 32 million people in our country that have food allergy. So, I started with just reaching out to my state reps here in New Hampshire about the FASTER Act. This was back in May of last year. And just what I did was I just sent a couple emails and told my story. And I was actually really excited. My representative, Annie Custer, was one of the first, I think she was the fifth person to sign on to the FASTER Act back in May of last year. So then we came around to February, March of this year, and I did the fly-in, which is where I got to meet you, which was really great, and a lot of other food allergy advocates. But we went through a lot of training to kind of understand what are the best approaches to get in touch with your legislators and get them on board with the FASTER Act and other food allergy legislation. So I think for me, what's been really great is, we made that face-to-face connection in March. And then what I've been doing since then is just following up. So every time something happens in the food allergy world that is important or is something that's related to legislation, I'll just reach out to them and say, hey, just wanted to send along this link. This is what's going on. With COVID, we had the FDA relax some of the guidelines around what they could include in ingredients that were less than 2% of a product's total weight, I believe it was. And so, that was a good opportunity to be able to reach out to them and say, hey, this is something that's affecting us. Just want to keep you in the loop. And, I've had really good success with that. So that's kind of been my overall strategy at the federal level.
Yeah. So I was going to just add on to that I think it's amazing when we attended the DC event, when FAIR came and did the fly-in for the FASTER Act, it really was my first experience on sort of the Washington beast, if you will, dealing with legislators and dealing with advocacy in that way. And I was so really excited to see, we are their constituents. We are the people who vote. They really are interested, and we all took a bunch of meetings. Everybody was very interested in hearing about this. And there was a vast difference in, how educated they already were, what they already knew about this act, what they already knew about food allergy. But it was such an amazing opportunity to educate. And as with all advocacy, I think what's really important is to add a personal story. I think that really hits home. So the fact that you're able to share your story, your son's story, is really important. So for sure, tell me about also locally in New Hampshire, what you're up to.
Sure. So last year, I started reaching out to my local state reps and telling them my story. Again, that just goes back to how important that story is as a way to connect with people and to get them to understand why this issue is so important. So I reached out to one of my state representatives and told her what had happened with us with our local daycare, and that, we really needed a law for training people in food allergy and anaphylaxis and how to recognize that. that. So she put together a bill, and I went up to the State House back in February of last year and got to provide my testimony. Again, it was a great way to share my story and let legislators know, what's happening to their constituents. And I think that was just kind of a little bit of an eye-opening experience for me, and I was really nervous going into it. But I just relied on kind of that passion and that persistence to kind of get me through it. And, there's great reception to it with everything that's going on in the world right now. It's likely postponed until our next congressional session. But, just to see lawmakers say, hey, this is really important. And there's a lot of educators that were involved on the board that reviewed the law. They said, this is a problem. We see this in our schools and we need to pay attention to it. We need to make sure that kids are safe. We need to make sure that people know how to recognize anaphylaxis and how to administer epi. So I think, regardless of where the bill goes, just having that education process has been really powerful so far. We also have another bill that is in regard to restaurants and to making sure that people have training on food allergy, cross-contact, and also with anaphylaxis. So that piece relates back to my story with going into anaphylaxis at a restaurant that I had visited many times before, and they had changed the ingredients in one of their recipes, and that's what sent me into anaphylaxis. So again, that personal story was really effective in pushing for that legislation to move forward.
That's really amazing. And I mean, look at how many things you've accomplished just in the last year and a half, especially in this crazy year we're living in. So congratulations to you. It's really impressive. I want to back up just a little bit and get to the really basic part of this, just in case there's somebody who's watching this at home who would like to do something similar. How do you go about finding your state representatives, who you need to contact? How do you contact them? How did you find that information?
Sure. So all of that information is easy to find online. So for my state in New Hampshire, I just went on to nh.gov and you can find your representative right there. So if you just type into a Google search, find my state representative, find my senator, find my congressman, you'll be able to do that really easily. And they'll all have phone number and email information on there. And I think the trick for me to actually get in touch with somebody who's in charge of healthcare legislation is to make sure that you can just give them a quick phone call, explain what you're trying to advocate for, and just ask if you can get the contact information for the person that's on their staff that is in charge of health-related legislation. And then you can make that personal connection with a real person in that office and kind of tell your story and move forward that way. But yeah, the first step I think is really just go online. It's very easy to find out who your reps are, who your senators are, both at the state level and the federal level.
That's such helpful advice. Thank you so much. And to your point about who on their staff is working on different areas, I didn't realize that until we went to DC, and every meeting we took, they'd come in with like an entourage and they have a whole team and everybody has a specific function, which of course makes sense because there's so much that they deal with. But you're exactly right to find the person who really is going to focus on this and can make it a priority. So those are great tips. I also want to add that I know you've done this also on the FAIR website in the advocacy section. There are draft emails that people can use and personalize to send. So if you feel overwhelmed about starting from scratch or explaining the FASTER Act, that's a great resource as well. I know you wrote a phenomenal blog for FAIR, and it's on the FAIR website, all about how you went through this process, so people at home can go check that out as well. So Heather, I want to hear about life before food allergy advocacy, because I think it's very interesting how we as moms pivot. We have a career or something going on in our life, you get married, you have babies, and things seem to change one thing after the next. So tell me sort of what your background is and how you've used whatever that background was towards this new food allergy advocacy role that you have now.
Sure, absolutely. So before I became a mom, and while I still am, but my career started out with graphic design, web design, and then evolved into user experience design. So I currently work at a company where we develop healthcare products, and I'm responsible for UI and UX development there. So that's really just figuring out what software needs to look like and do and how it needs to function. And most of our work is done in the medical realm. So I think with my background in user experience, you really need to have a strong sense of empathy to be able to design products for people that are actually going to be effective and really help to change their lives. So I think that component of my career has really been effective for me in advocacy and really being able to be empathetic to, the rest of the food allergy community and help communicate the messages that I hear from all other parents and moms and families that we talk to. With becoming a mom, it was a challenge kind of figuring out how to balance a career and have a newborn and all of the highs and lows that come along with that. I think when the food allergy came into play, it was pretty stressful at first in figuring out how to manage that. But I think, along with my husband, we kind of learned how to do that together and be an advocate for our son. And again, just that advocacy on behalf of our son also was a very useful skill for advocating for the legislation that we've been working on.
Well, and I think that's such an incredible point, because I often talk to parents who are maybe newly diagnosed or overwhelmed, or really like in that thick of it in the beginning where it just feels so overwhelming and scary, completely understandably. And we've all been there. And they don't sort of know how to move forward. And I always say, start with your family, start with your child. Every time you explain your child's allergy to somebody, that's advocating. You're educating, you're advocating, you're teaching somebody, you're making the world safer for everyone with food allergies. Every time you talk to that teacher, that babysitter, that doctor, that daycare worker. So starting in those small steps is super important. And the more comfortable you become sharing that information and sharing that story and educating in that way sets you up to be able to do it in a bigger way like what you're doing now. So it's great to hear that was your experience as well. And speaking of those sort of newly diagnosed families, what would you go back and say to you? It's a little bit different because I know you also had food allergy, but I'd love to hear your tips or your advice for those newly diagnosed, in the thick of it parents that are watching right now.
Sure. So I think as a mom, I put a lot of blame on myself for my son's food allergy. And I asked myself, why did this happen? Is there something that I could have done differently when I was pregnant? Or is this my fault because I already have a food allergy? And yes, it's very overwhelming. And even if you don't have a food allergy background in your own family, I think in some ways it can be even more overwhelming because you're not familiar with how to read labels or what to do to advocate for your child or what types of foods contain your child's allergen. So I would say my biggest advice is don't be so hard on yourself. You'll get through it. You'll figure it out along the way. And, eventually it's going to become second nature to read labels, to advocate for your child, and to make sure that your child is safe. So yes, it's definitely overwhelming and you'll get through it.
And that's such a good point. And I'm so glad you brought this up about the mom guilt. So I don't have food allergies, but I still had the mom guilt about what did I do wrong? I think we moms just want to take responsibility for things. And, I did all the things right according to the current research. And my kids are literally allergic to the earth. I mean, so none of us really know why. So I am with you that you have to give yourself some grace, whether or not you had food allergies, whether or not how you gave birth, whether or not you breastfed. I'm of the camp that it really there's nothing we can do about it. It's nothing that anybody did wrong. So anybody out there who needs to hear that, give yourself some grace, mama, because there's a lot of us in this camp. So thank you for sharing that, because I agree. And then I really want to also hear, what are your favorite resources? So are there other food allergy Instagram accounts you like, websites you like, magazines you like? Where do you go when you need some good information?
So when when my son was first diagnosed, the first place I went to was FAIR's website, actually. And FAIR has a ton of excellent resources for getting familiar with what food allergy is, what anaphylaxis is, and how to start managing that. And what I did was I printed out a lot of those and I shared them with my child's caregivers so that they could have some familiarity with it, along with explaining everything to them. It was kind of a leave behind at daycare to say, hey, take a look at this information. This is a little more detail about everything, because a lot of times in a daycare setting, it can be very stressful. There's lots of kids, running around. So sometimes it may seem that, the daycare teachers and staff might not be, fully processing everything that you say. So I think, going to FAIR's website and downloading the resources there has been a great resource. I'm in a lot of food allergy groups on Facebook. That's actually where I would say that was kind of my therapy early on in our food allergy journey. It was really great to be able to have that space to talk to other parents about what they've been going through, or, get some other personal anecdotes from other people to see how they had dealt with things. That's definitely been a great resource. And I think Instagram has been really great as well, just to see how people's lives are evolving and changing, and how they're dealing with food allergy. I know, Hillary, on your Instagram, I love to be able to see when your family is doing new food challenges and watch your journey with your two sons, and how you guys have been dealing with everything that's thrown at you. So I think that's social media sometimes can be construed as not a great resource, but I think for food allergy, for me, it's been amazing. It's been great to find a community that I can relate to, that can relate to me, and is a place for a sounding board for what's going on in our lives.
And I really want to sort of chime in and say I agree as far as getting to connect with other moms on social media. I think for me, one of the most amazing resources has just been other food allergy moms. So I always try to tell people who are newly diagnosed, like, find your person, find your food allergy mom. I'll be your food allergy mom. But, we have so much to share, so many tips, so many new foods, so many things that worked and didn't work. And, you have to go in with the understanding that, of course, none of us are medical doctors. You have to be careful about medical advice that you see people giving. So that's sort of always a caveat. But I think, really just the empathy and the understanding. I completely agree that it feels like therapy. Just having somebody understand you is huge. So I'm glad that you have found sort of your resources there. And I agree with you that I love getting to see people's successes on Instagram. I know sometimes it's a highlight reel, but also just getting to see what everybody's dealing with is always great. That connection is important. Are you a part of a support group locally? Or is there any sort of group of friends, food allergy friends that you have locally?
Yeah, so we actually have a local Facebook group, our Southern New Hampshire Allergy Moms, and that's where I've met a lot of other allergy moms in the area. And most of this has been kind of post-COVID, so I haven't actually met a lot of people in real life, but definitely made some great connections there. And I could feel comfortable reaching out to people saying, recently we just moved my son to a new daycare, so that was a great resource to be able to say, hey, for other moms and friends in the area, where have you found daycares that understand food allergy? Where have you found people that aren't quite there yet? So to be able to have that local resource is also amazing, and to be able to develop some friendships with people that are going through the same things that you are is great.
That's awesome. And I saw on Instagram that you were working on a food allergy friendly holiday food drive. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So that kind of came out of my husband and I talking about, what we wanted to do for the holidays this year. And, we always like to find an organization that we can contribute to. And we thought about where could we kind of go next. And I think with our lives, our biggest struggle has been food allergy. And so we've seen a lot of people in our community hit hard by COVID-19, and a lot of the food pantries in the area really needing some assistance there. So we kind of came up with the thought, like, let's try starting a food drive. We'd never done it before. There was a little bit of a learning process, but what I did was I called around to a bunch of food pantries in the area to find out who would take food allergy friendly donations and make sure that they get into the hands of food allergy families. So it was a little bit disappointing to find out that there are some pantries that just don't accommodate food allergy clients, but it gave me a great sense of hope when we found about 4 right in our local area here that have food allergy clients, and we're looking for donations of that type. So that's been really great. We've had lots of friends and family donate to that, and it's been a new experience kind of going through that process of setting up a sort of a food drive and figuring out how to distribute everything. But overall, it's been very good.
That's amazing. And how long will this project go on?
Yeah, we're actually wrapping up on Saturday. So we've gotten some cash donations and we've gotten some physical donations. Actually, one of the great things that we did was I set up an Amazon wish list so that everybody that's not in the local area of friends and family could just go on there and purchase some items and then just ship directly to us. So that made it really easy to be contact free and be able to contribute that way. But yes, we have some funds to be able to do some shopping to kind of balance out the wish list a little bit. So we'll be doing that this weekend, and then we'll be dropping off the donations next week.
That's incredible. And that's a whole other kind of advocacy on top of all of the other work you're doing. And I think you've given us such great tips for how to get it done, to start by calling your local food bank, see who will, accept food allergy friendly food, make sure it's going to go to the right family. So that is something so tangible that people at home could do if they wanted to get involved. And as we all know, like food equality is, such an issue when it comes to food allergies, and being able to find the food you need is not that easy, and it's so much more expensive than your everyday regular food. So this is certainly a big issue that you're tackling, and so congratulations, that's amazing.
I'd say that Emily Brown has been a huge inspiration for me and kind of figuring out how to do this. And Food Equality Initiative, for anybody out there that wants to check them out, they have some great resources and things to do to help food pantries understand what food allergy is and how they can accommodate their clients.
Yes, she's amazing, and that's such a great resource for anyone to go check out. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I want to wrap up with just sort of some final thoughts. You are doing so much incredible work and working full time and raising a son, and it's amazing. If you had just your top tip or two for those out there who maybe are just thinking about getting started in advocacy, sort of taking that first step, thinking about taking action, what would you suggest they do to get started?
See, I think to get started, find out who your representatives are and your senators are, and just reach out to them. Sometimes you might not hear back right away, but I think that leads me to my second point, is that you want to be persistent and don't let the lack of response get you down. If you continue to reach out to them and talk about your story and let them know why it's important, that's your voice, and just getting your voice out there, it's really powerful. And I think a lot of times with food allergy, sometimes we can feel really helpless. And for me, being able to do this advocacy work has brought some empowerment to that, and to the fact that, even though I'm one person, I can make change and I can help others to do the same. So I think that would be my final piece of advice.
I love it. That's wonderful. And tell us one more time, if anybody wants to follow your journey, where they can find you online.
Sure. So I am at Food Allergy Advocate on Instagram, and I have the same page also on Facebook. So you share a lot of the advocacy work that I've been working on, along with anecdotes about my son and the highs and lows of going through the food allergy journey.
That's great. And as I mentioned earlier, I know you also have some cool stuff on FAIR's website, foodallergy.org. You've written a blog. I've seen a cool recipe. You are a part of the summit. So if anybody wants to check out your work over there, or any other ways they can get involved with advocacy work, go check out foodallergy.org. And if anybody wants to follow along with me, I'm on Instagram at Hillary Toll Carter, and my website is hillarytollcarter.com. Heather, I loved chatting with you. It was so much fun meeting you earlier this year in DC. I hope we get to do that in person again soon. In the meantime, you are really kicking some booty out there, and I'm super proud of you. And I'm glad we got to share your amazing story. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Hillary. It was great to talk to you, and great job with all of the advocacy work you've been doing as well. I think this is a great community, and I'm so happy to be a part of it and to share this message with everyone.
Thank you so much.